who volunteered. You heard that word correct, volunteered. And they possessed all of the qualifications, physical and mental, that it took to become what they did. Now, most people focus in only on pilots and no one else. These gentlemen here today will tell you it was more than just pilots. You can't fly an airplane unless you have a crew chief who the airplane actually belongs to. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Buford, to this day, military aircraft is not assigned to the pilot. It is signed for by the crew chief. Is that correct, Mr. Buford? Correct. So when a crew chief person tells the pilot, you better bring my plane back in one piece, he's really telling the truth because it's his plane. It's anybody who's ever served in the military. When you sign for something, you're responsible for it, no matter if somebody else destroys it or whatever. That's your responsibility. And they met that challenge. Moton Field is named for Dr. Robert Moton, who served with distinction for some 20 years there at Tuskegee. And that is where the pilots trained. The 99th Squadron has been awarded numerous presidential citations during World War II and was part of the 12th Air Force. Now, does anybody know where the 12th Air Force headquarters was during the up until I think probably the late 70s? This is a test. 12th Air Force headquarters. Wasn't it Bergstrom Air Force Base? I'm sure y'all Google that after a while, but I believe it may have been. It's now Bergstrom Airport. You might hear the gentleman today talk about names like Chief Anderson. Chief Anderson was the chief instructor at Tuskegee. He's also the one who was portrayed in the HBO movie as flying around Eleanor Roosevelt. That actually happened. And a Secret Service agent did tell Chief Anderson, he said to him, boy, you better not kill the president's wife. And I'm thinking, if he did, I mean, what were they going to do to him? That's another story. But she did go home and tell her husband, she said, you know, these gentlemen down there do know how to fly. And the program was continued. Of course, in 1948, President Harry Truman signed an act that integrated the services because prior to that, when these gentlemen served, they served in an all African-American unit. And they'll talk about the bomber pilots that they escorted. So, now comes the test. And a lot of times when you take tests, as many of you do, you're only rewarded with good grades. And good grades turn into high honors with degrees, which turn into getting a job later on. So today when you take this test, I will reward you immediately. And what you'll be rewarded with is a commemorative Air Force poster, which is signed by about 6 or 7 airmen, one of them being one of the airmen who was a POW. So if you see the movie Red Tails, the POW that strafed the train, he was advisor to George Lucas on that movie. His name is Alex Jefferson. It appears on these posters. And of course, Mr. Keel and Mr. Johnson are on these as well. Now, you don't have to get it completely right because you may not have all the facts unless you're that guy or that girl who studies all the time and you may be up on your history. First of all, how many pilots went through pilot training program at Tuskegee? Now, I want you to raise your hand and then, you know, try and get as close as you can. How many pilots? We have a few hands. That's your answer? Final answer. Incorrect. Next person. For brevity, just have him go ahead and say the young man over there with the thing hanging over his neck. What's your answer?
25.
The young man. 50? You sure? Guess what? That's incorrect. Next person back here with a hand raised.
22.
Behind.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Really?
There's 22 people in that picture.
That's one class. Yes, sir. Or,
Ma'am.
yes, ma'am.
Over 1,000.
We'll come back to you. Okay, two more. In the middle.
1,000.
Who blurted out an answer over there? I don't know.
196? 996.
Who said 996? Whoa. Shame, shame, shame. I'm afraid Wikipedia is incorrect. Okay, still incorrect. The person who said close to 1,000 back here, I think it was a young lady back here. Stand up, please. It was 992. Okay, this will be an easy one. There was 992. Name them.
Airmen.
I didn't see any hands go up.
Got one over here.
Yeah, okay.
Airmen. They were all named Airmen.
Yeah, almost. Okay. Now, we're going to have to ask that you just raise your hand on this one and not blurt it out. But what was the name of the commanding general? It's a two-part question. And what was his father's name? Actually, it's an easy question. Okay, don't blurt it out now. Anyone? Okay, in the back.
Benjamin Davis.
I'll take that as the answer to one part of the questions.
Benjamin Davis II.
Incorrect. But for time's sake, you know what? Oh, wait, hold on. We have one more.
Henry Davis.
Excuse me?
Henry Davis.
Now listen. I said that his answer to the question, Benjamin Davis, was part right to one of the questions. And it was father and son. It was an easy question. That should have led you, like it led the gentleman who said Benjamin Davis II. The answer was Benjamin Oliver Davis Sr. and Benjamin Oliver Davis Jr. So the person I think that was the most correct was the person with a hand wave that I can't see because of the light. Would you come forward and receive your prize? Oh, really? Okay. Quick facts, and then the gentleman will speak. Tuskegee Airmen once shot down 3 German jets in a single day. They flew propeller airplanes, and they shot down German jets. Another fact, Thurgood Marshall, Supreme Court Justice, got his start as a Tuskegee bomber trainee. And in 1970, a former Tuskegee Airman almost shot down the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. His name was Daniel Chappie James. in 1971 and 72, I had the distinction of serving under General James. I had no idea he was a Tuskegee Airman. There wasn't much talk back in the 70s about Tuskegee Airmen. But after I got out of the service and became involved with the Tuskegee Airmen, I was pleased to find out about him. I was asked earlier today how I got started with Tuskegee Airmen, and it started some 16, 17 years ago. A young man who is my junior, Clarence Andrew Callis Jr., asked me a question. He said, "Dad, I want to do a history fair project on the Tuskegee Airmen." I said, "Sure." I contacted a gentleman named Richard Jennings in Detroit, Michigan, who was a curator of their museum. He sent me a book that was signed by people like General Davis and others. Some of the airmen had been long deceased. And when he sent me the book, he said, "Listen, when you're through with it, just send it back." And I thought, you have removed a book from a museum, sent it to me, a person you do not know, and all you asked was for me to return it when I'm done. So that kind of piqued my interest. When my son was done with his report, which went all the way to the state, to the state level of junior historian, he asked me, he said, "Dad, I sure would like to meet some of these gentlemen. Could you bring them to Houston?" How many of you in here are dads? A few. Your children ever ask you for things? And you want to try your best to man up and short of, letting them, juggle chainsaws or whatever, you want to make sure that you provide for them what they ask for. And so I started looking into it. Well, as Paul Harvey says, the rest of the story, fast forward 16 years later, the airmen have been coming to Houston and speaking in the Aldine School District that whole time, telling about all of the things that they experienced, the obstacles that they overcame, and how even today, at the young age of 91, almost 92, and 86, almost 87, they are still traveling to do that. I have found my fountain of youth, and I travel with them because they rub off on me and keep me young. So, we have today Mr. Buford Top Gun Johnson, and he'll explain to you why I call him Top Gun. And next to him is Mr. Daniel Keel. He is a triple-rated Tuskegee Airman. And you're thinking, triple-rated? Triple threat? What's that? He's going to have to explain all of that to you. And I don't know who's decided to go first, but Mr. Keel will be going first. He's the elder statesman, so he will regale you of how he got to Tuskegee, what he did while he was there, all of the assignments and things that he did, and the obstacles that he overcame. And then Mr. Johnson will tell you some things that happened a long while ago and about some trophies and things that weren't awarded and how they were hidden for 50 years, and finally he was given that accolade. So I am going to hush and sit down, and you will listen to them very intently. This may be the only opportunity that you have to hear living history, so listen carefully.
My name is Daniel Keel. I would like to say the Tuskegee Airmen proved to the world if a Negro was given the opportunity with a good education, hard work, and a little luck, he could do the job as well as anyone else. We had myths and many obstacles to overcome, and overcome them we did. And we believe that our performance during World War II played an important role in President Harry Truman ordering the Army Air Force desegregated in 1948. Although true desegregation didn't take place until 1965, and it took 4 days of intense rioting at Travis Air Force Base to really bring it about. The myth we had to overcome our brain was supposed to be 25% smaller. Now, we Tuskegee Airmen believe that as Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, President Roosevelt's wife, had not been a staunch supporter of the Tuskegee movement, it had never gotten off the ground. And if it had gotten off the ground, we doubt very much whether we would have ever been given the chance to prove what we could do if we were allowed to combat. When President Roosevelt finally ordered the Army to train Negroes to become pilots, over 15,000 of us took and passed the exam. Of the 15,000 of us that took and passed the exam, they only took 10%. But before that 10% was chosen, we had to take another test. It was a two-part test. The first part of the test was called a psychological test. It was a multiple choice test, and it lasted 8 hours. The second part of the test was called a psychometric test. It only lasted 4 hours. Of the 10% of us that were finally chosen, about 70% of us made it all the way through. Now, to those of you who may have seen the movie Red Tail, that movie showed you what the Negro pilots did and accomplished once they were allowed into combat. It doesn't tell you anything that took place before they went in, nor does it tell you anything that took place after they got out. The Negro pilots that were finally sent overseas into combat had to fight 2 wars. The first war was against racism in this country to become pilots. The second war was racism that was sent with us overseas, and fascism once we were allowed into combat. The Tuskegee Airmen who were sent overseas, well, let's put it this way. Once they were sent overseas, their main mission was to help defend Liberia from Rommel advances. But by the time they got over there, Rommel wasn't advancing, he was retreating. So the Negro pilots was placed on patrolling way behind the front lines. After about 5 or 6 months, the Negro pilots start complaining about seeing more action. And their commanding officer, Momeyer, told his superiors that he didn't think the Negro pilots under pressure could take it, and they didn't figure they had the ability to accomplish anything. And as far as he was concerned, they should be disbanded and sent back to the States. And while they were over there, they hadn't shot down one Indian airplane after 6 months. And of course, Davis' argument was that how could you shoot down something you never saw? Finally, Momeyer, under pressure, decided to have the Negro pilots escort bombers on training missions, on missions over enemy territory. The bombers that Momeyer had been sending the bombers on had come back with heavy losses, and the State Department and the Defense Department was highly critical of what Momeyer was doing. So when Momeyer ordered the Negro pilots to escort bombers over enemy territories, Davis had a good idea where Momeyer was coming from. And he had a good idea why the bombers were suffering such heavy losses. You see, each and every fighter pilot back there wanted to be an ace. An ace was who shot down more than 5 enemy airplanes. So when the bombers became under attack, the fighter pilots did what they're supposed to do. They drove the enemy planes away from the bombers. But when the enemy planes started leaving the bombers, the fighter pilots went at them with a vengeance, trying to make that extra kill. But again, by doing so, they left the bombers totally unprotected. And with another group of enemy airplanes circling overhead, seeing their comrades being chased away, swooped down on the bombers and had a field day. Davis told his men that's what he thought it was taking place. And Davis told his men that when they were escorting bombers, their job was to stay with them. And the first one of his men he saw chasing after an enemy plane, or heard chasing after an enemy plane, he would court-martial him and have him grounded. So you see, the planes the Negro pilots were escorting was nevertheless without fighter protection. The price didn't come cheap, though, because of the 400 odd that were sent overseas. Approximately 100 of us never made it back. Now, there's one thing I'd like for all of y'all to remember. and that the Tuskegee Airmen were not all pilots. There were navigators, there were bombardiers, there were doctors, there were nurses, instructors, PT instructors, cooks, maintenance men. All of those people were part of the Tuskegee experiment. At its peak, there were approximately 14,000 men and women who would be called later on Tuskegee Airmen. Of that 14,000 odd, 900 plus were pilots. They were single rated. 250 of us were navigators and bombardiers. We were dual rated. And only 5 of us were navigators, bombardiers, and pilots. We were triple rated. I was one of the 5 that was triple rated. All the remaining personnel were support personnel. And I think they did an outstanding job also. Well, most of them. And the reason why I say most of them, because I know of 2 instructors who were bribed to have me thrown out of pilot training. Now, I'll tell you briefly what I went through to become a pilot. First of all, I believe there wasn't a single Negro who became a pilot who ran into as many obstacles as I did. You see, after I received my navigator wings at Hondo, Texas, we were told the planes the Negroes are flying in Garden Field are medium bombers. And the medium bombers required that the navigator be a bombardier. And we were sent to Midland, Texas to train to become bombardiers. As soon as we got off the train in Midland, Texas, an Army officer walked up to us and told us that he was Lieutenant Colonel Phelps. That he, Lieutenant Colonel Phelps, was the Deputy Commander of Midland Army Air Base. And that he, Lieutenant Colonel Phelps, he was born in Texas, he was raised in Texas, and he expected to die in Texas. And if we Negroes didn't know our place while we were in his state of Texas, he'd spell it out for us. 1, we could not eat in the officers' mess. 2, we could not go in the officers' club. 3, if we go to the theater, we could not sit in the officers' section. And 4, if we go to town, we had to ride the back of the bus. 12 o'clock sharp, we arrived at the cadet mess hall to eat our noonday meal. Meals back in those days were called breakfast, dinner, and supper. 12:05, 10, 15, 20, no food. But we observed that every time a group of white cadets came in and sat down, they were promptly fed. After the last group had been fed, the mess sergeant and his crew started bringing this officer what was left of the food. By this time, we were so mad that we told the mess sergeant and his crew to take the food and shove it, walked over to the officer's mess and demanded that we be fed. Next morning after breakfast, Phelps and his crew came over to our quarters, demanding to know why we had disobeyed his orders. We told the lieutenant colonel what had taken place, and he told us that the excuse was not good enough for him, and for disobeying his orders, we were going to have each and every one of us court-martialed. One of my classmates, who had spent a year at the Pentagon in D.C. before becoming a navigator, said to us, if we're going to be court-martialed, let's not be court-martialed by a lieutenant colonel, let's be court-martialed by a general. Of course, we said, what difference does it make a court-martial being a court-martial? He said, it just looked better on our record saying we're court-martialed by a general than a lieutenant colonel. So we said, in that case, write us a letter. An hour or so later, a letter was brought over my quarters. After reading the letter, I asked him, had my classmate behind me read it? He said, yes, because me and my roommate were the last quarters in the barracks. Then I asked him, did they approve the letter? He said, yes. Then I said, if they read and approved the letter, why aren't any signatures on the letter? The answer was, they were afraid that he who signed the letter first, Phelps was considered the ringleader, and that's why no one would want to sign it first. So I said, I guess I'll have momentarily be the ringleader. So I was the first one to sign the letter, and later on, most, but not all my classmates co-signed the letter. Later that afternoon, we sent the letter Airmail Special delivered to the Southwestern University, and we placed a copy of the letter on the base commander's desk. 2 or 3 days later, a group of white officers came over to our quarters and told us that the general was on the base and ordered every white officer to meet with him in the theater to discuss our situation. When the meeting was over, they said they would come back and give us a report. About an hour or so later, they came back and gave us a report. After all the white officers had assembled in the theater, the general threw out the question, how should we be treated? And we were told the discussion became so heated that a fist fight broke out amongst the white officers in the base theater. And the only way the general was able to quell the melee by having the national anthem played. After orders were restored, the general told the officers in the theater that though we were Negroes, we were officers in the United States Army Air Force, and therefore we would be treated with the same respect, privileges, and any other thing that any other officer on that base. Walked off the podium, followed by the base commander. No sooner had the door closed on the two men when the colonel told the officer in the theater before he dismissed them, he'd get him in those Negroes, the last thing he ever did. 2 weeks later, he tried to have me and 5 more of my classmates court-martialed. We failed. 2 weeks before graduation, he tried everything in his book. He was told the sentence of some godforsaken island in the Pacific. Again, he failed. 2 weeks later, found us at Garden Field where the Negro pilots were transitional training. Now, the reason why there were no Negro pilots, twin-engine pilots, the war zone at the time, the commanding officer of Garden Field was a racist, and his immediate boss was a racist. The reason why we believe we made it through Midland without any casualties, because Midland Army Air Base was not only a training center, it was an R&R base for return combat bombardiers. And those return combat bombardiers were our instructors. And they go to combat bombardiers knowing what the Red Tails had done for them while they were in combat, and were still doing for their comrades they left behind. We believe Phelps was not able to coerce them, intimidate them, or bribe them in any way, shape, or form to have some of us thrown out of pilot training. Right after we arrived at Garden Field, the Army brass realized that at that time they didn't have enough pilots to accommodate all us navigators. So they sent us back to Tuskegee to train to become pilots. When we arrived back at Tuskegee to become pilots, there were approximately 27 in my group. When graduation day rolled around, there were only 3 of us left. We feel strongly that Phelps had a hand. As a matter of fact, I strongly believe now that when the 27 of us were sent back to become pilots, not a single one of us was supposed to make it. The second week on the base at Tuskegee Army Air Base, when we walked in our AI-NI class, we saw 10 X's up on the blackboard. When our instructor walked in, who was a Negro and a civilian, said, "You see those 10 X's?" We said, "Yes." Come Friday, 10 of you men will no longer be in this class. Momentarily, we were stunned by his remarks. And then we said, "Lieutenant Colonel Phelps, that rascal tentacles that followed us all the way over the Tuskegee Army Air Base. Come Friday, true to his word, 10 of us thrown out of pilot training. I topped the list." Well, we wrote and sent a letter to the Southeastern Commanding General. A few days later, he was on the base, met with a delegation from our class. After the meeting was over, the 10 of us that were thrown out of pilot training was placed back in the program, and the instructor was fired. Now, while this was going on, I was surprised to see that 1/3 of my classmates were told they could not solo the plane in a quiet time, but promptly sent back to Garden Field. At the end of lower primary, half my classmates had been thrown out. At the end of upper primary, 2/3 of my classmates had been thrown out. We strongly believe Phelps had a hand in it. Just before we end basic flight training, we were told 2 things. One, all training done in basic advance was done by Army personnel, and some of the instructors were not very friendly. The second thing we were told, that the planes that everyone had trained before us were no longer going to be used for training purposes. The planes that we would have to learn how to fly now, the planes that everyone before us had learned how to fly in advance. Fortunate for us, just before we entered basic flight training, the Army brass made a returned black 99th captain and instructor, and I and 2 of my classmates were his first pupils. At the end of basic flight training, you guessed it, we were the only 3 left. We strongly believe Phelps had a hand in getting the rest of the others. Just before we entered advanced flight training, we were told the flight game had changed one more time, thank goodness. The planes that twin-engine students had learned how to fly were no longer being trained on how to fly B-25 would be the B-25 Billy Mitchell bombers. Single-engine students would be flying the P-40 fighter plane. Now, we went down on the flight line, we saw several B-25s on the flight line, but no P-40s. That meant that the single-engine students would have the same instructors in advanced they had in basic, whereas the twin-engine student, our instructors who taught them how to fly the AT-10s did not qualify to teach them how to fly the B-25. That meant outside instructors got brought in. Just after we finished basic flight training, my instructor told Nims and Williams, the two remaining in my group, that they were going to be twin-engine pilots. I was going to be trained to be a fighter pilot. Just as soon as he finished telling me I was going to be a fighter pilot, I knew under the present conditions, my chances of being a fighter pilot training ran anywhere between slim to none. And I told my instructor so. He told me he didn't make the assignments, he just carried them out. And I told him that may be true, but I appreciate it very much if you'd have been transferred from single engine to twin engine. A couple hours later, he came back and told me I wish I'd been granted. And to make sure that there's no hanky-panky going on, he saw to it that all three of us had the same instructor. He made sure that the instructor that we had was not a racist, but hard-working. 2 weeks before graduation, all I had to do to become a pilot and get a promotion was to pass my cross-country instrument flight check and pass my AI/NI test. The day before I was supposed to have my instrument flight check, I developed a wicked cold. My throat was so raw I couldn't hardly swallow. A couple of my former classmates who were in the base, because of a mutiny going on at Freeman Field, suggested that the quickest way to get rid of it was to take a good shot of Alabama moonshine. I took a good shot of Alabama moonshine and spent the next 7 days in the hospital. After talking my way out of the hospital, I went up to my instructor, told him I was ready to take my test. He said, sorry, all tests for my class have been completed, and I'd have to wait till the next class comes along. I told him I didn't want to wait, I wanted to take it now. Friday afternoon, he told me that the Tushegge Airmen were playing the Marines down in Camp of June, Saturday, and if I would take the equipment down on Saturday, he would go down as my co-pilot, and on the way back, he would give me my test. I flew a person mission down and a person mission back. After I came back, I told my classmate what was going on. My classmate told me, not so fast. He said, there's a rumor going around that if Robin Ed, who's a black second lieutenant, failed you in the AI/NI, he would be promoted to a first lieutenant. Phelps was still after you. After we took the test, we compared notes, and I figured if I failed, they failed. Tuesday, when we got our marks, their marks was somewhere between 96 and 100. I knew then I'd pass. After all the papers passed out, I asked the instructor, what is my test paper? Robin said somehow if he lost mine, and by losing mine, I would have to take another test. And if I passed the test, the highest mark I could get was a 7. I won't tell you what I said to him. After I took the test, I was so mad I didn't care what I put down on that paper. But I guess I must have put down the right answers. Because he took one look at my test and said, you passed. Your mark is a 7. Now, we know the only reason why he passed me, because he knew what happened to instruct that poor that stunned us in primary. The day before graduation, I was told to go and sign my records. I was given my flight records, said very satisfactory assignment. And I was given my academic record, the sheet was blank. I looked after the man behind the desk, I said, this cotton picking form is blank. The man said, you want your wings coming Monday morning? I said, certainly. He said, you better sign it. If you don't sign it, you will not get your pilot wings. I signed the blank form, and Monday morning when I received my pilot wings, I was denied my promotion. 2 things I'll always remember when I was in the Army Air Force. 1, not all white people back then were racist, and 2, not all black people had one best interest at heart. Thank you.
My name is Buford A. Johnson, and I want to tell you, in the getting here. I really appreciate you guys honoring us. And this man here who came before I did and opened the doors for me, made everything work great for me, because I can tell you from the beginning of my life, I've had a good ride. I've had a wonderful ride. Now, he told you about the Air Force integrating in 1947, I think it was, but we integrated in 1949. We went to black, all black unit. Our whole base was black. And we went to other units. They had never seen black mechanics, aircraft mechanics, or people that even near aircraft. And there were 6 of us who were mechanics. And they had 3 squadrons. P-51 squadron. I guess you guys know what a P-51 Mustang is like. It's the aircraft they ended up with in moving Red Tail. Very good fighter aircraft. And as he told you, the aircraft is assigned to a crew chief. I was a crew chief. All the maintenance and all the ins and outs of the aircraft is known by the crew chief. And he is responsible for getting it ready to go in the morning and at night whenever it has to go. And when he comes back, he's the one that complains because maybe the pilot did something wrong that he shouldn't have done. But that doesn't matter, it's just what we do. But anyway, to make a long story short, I was a crew chief, and the Air Force came to a decision that they should have a competition. They wanted to know what unit, fighting unit, was the best. Well, I think they didn't really realize what the impact would be if we won first place. So they had a meeting out in Vegas, a place called Nellis Air Force Base, and they invited each fighter group there to compete with each other. We dropped bombs on the target, we fired rockets on the target, and then they fired guns, 50 caliber machine guns at a target being towed by another aircraft. And whoever gets the most accurate hits wins. So, believe it or not, we won first place. And from that, you can gather, we weren't just good. We weren't even just better. We were the best. We were the best in the United States Air Force. In fact, we have a member of our Air Force, his name is Colonel Charles McGee, who has more combat flying time than any other pilot in the United States Air Force. The guy's been in 3 wars. And in 1925, there was a survey that said blacks can't fly airplanes. They don't have that up here. Well, I'd like to see whoever wrote that survey and let them see what has happened since then. Yeah. You can't tell a book by its cover, neither can you tell the quality of a person by the color of their skin. It's like taking 2 eggs, a brown egg and a white egg, boil them, peel them, then which one's which? You see, the color is just skin deep. And another thing I want to tell you. Now, he gave you a good outline about what the Tushegge Airmen was all about. The trophy we won was about that tall. And about a year after we won it, someone asked Las Vegas who won first place in environment. They said they didn't know. But the trophy was hidden someplace. And then there was a lady named Zella Orr, who was a historian, tracked the trophy down and it was in a closet somewhere. Today, it's in the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. If you're ever in that area, you can go by and see the trophy. I want to give you something else to go by, though. You came out here to listen to us, and he's giving you a good idea about what Tuskegee Airmen is all about, but I want to give you something about what life is about. Now, if you have aspirations, and a lot of you do, because here in America, you're known by how much money you got and how much you've got of this. If you have aspirations for building the biggest house on top of the highest hill, and in your 10-car garage, you got the Rolls Royce, the Bentley, the Lamborghini, the Maserati, the Mercedes, and all those fine cars. And in the bank, you got so many banks because they only insure 100,000. You got a bank here and here and here, and then what's left over you send it to Switzerland. You just got it all, right? But let me tell you something. If you don't have love for your fellow man, you have absolutely nothing. If you feel like laughing, laugh. If you have a reason to apologize for something you said or something you've done, do it right away. Don't hesitate. If you encounter a situation that can be repaired or fixed or changed, or don't hesitate. Don't waste your time with it if you can't handle it. Leave it alone. Why? Because life is too short to be anything but happy. Life is too short to be anything but happy. 1 month and 13 years, I'll be 100 years old. He'll be 100, even shorter than that. So life is too short to be anything but happy. So don't let the little stuff bother you. There was a farmer in East Texas where I was born. His horse fell into a pit. And he didn't have the equipment to get the horse out of the pit. So he called his neighbors because he thought maybe I'd just go ahead and bury him then. He called his neighbors and said, bring your shovels and we're going to bury this horse. So they came and they started putting dirt in the pit on the horse's back, and he'd shake it off and step on it. Well, believe it or not, after a day, the horse just walked out of the pit. So, in essence, what I'm saying to you is, when things get difficult for you, shake it off. Shake it off. Don't let things bother you. Don't let little things bother you. Why? Life is too short. Any of you guys remember when O.J. Simpson was being chased down the freeway? Were you born? Were you born when he was chased down the freeway? He had killed, they say he killed his wife or something. They said that was 20 years ago. How can that be 20 years ago? Time is just passing by fast. Now, are there any questions? I know I haven't covered a lot of things. I will tell you a little bit today. When I went to Japan as the first black that went to this base, I'd never seen black mechanics before. They had this airplane in the hangar, stripped down. I mean, it was just a shell. Now, they don't know me and I don't know them, but they said, well, we're going to give this to that guy. They gave it to me. And you know what? When they give you a lemon in life, what do you do with it?
Make lemonade.
You got it. I took the old airplane, I cleaned it up, I put what needed to be on it. I had never worked on that kind of airplane before, but the aircraft I had worked previously to, prior to that one, was twice the size, more complicated and so on. A P-47 has got 18 cylinders, 36 spark plugs. Now, you guys who are mechanics know what 36 spark plugs on an airplane, that's a lot of spark plugs. It has supercharger, it has all the big stuff on it. So this P-51 is a Mustang, little small airplane. Has a Rolls-Royce engine, V12, and it has radiator, it's a liquid-cooled engine. And it was nothing for me, so I ordered what I needed, put the airplane together, cleaned it up, stenciled everything that needed to be stenciled. And I did my ground check, and I called for a pilot to take it up and test out there. Well, he took it up, came back, and gave me this. That means okay. So, about a month later, we changed over from P-51s to jets. Now, we were the first outfit to get jets. The first one came on the base. Who do you think they gave it to? Me. The first African-American jet mechanic in the Air Force. The first African-American jet mechanic in combat with jets. Okay? I didn't do all that by myself. Because of the Tuskegee Airmen before me, they opened the door and I went in. Now, I live by a principle that I might tell you, when you encounter problems, you can use this principle too, I don't mind. I was telling I see he's thinking I'm telling, listen, my mother told me when I was a youngster. And I'm not going to tell you how I went to school before I could walk. I'm not going to tell you that, I'm just going to let you know. She told me, good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better is best. So, whenever you encounter something or you've got a task to do, regardless of what it is, do your best. That way you don't have to do it over. Do your best. Now, in the Tuskegee Airmen, we have 6 principles. First one is aim high. Don't be just good. Be best. Be the best. The second one is believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. You can be anything you believe you can be. And anything you don't try to be, you can't be. The third one is use your brain. This little piece of stuff up here, use it. You ever see a English walnut? They say that's brain food, and it's even shaped like a brain, you know, that little, yeah. Use your brain. The fourth one, be ready to go when the door of opportunity opens for you. Have your little bag of knowledge, education, and when the door opens, pick it up and go. The fifth one, never, ever give up. Don't quit. Success may be just waiting around the corner when you quit. Never quit. Last but not least, believe you can win. When you go to the casino and put your $100 down, believe you're going to win. Now, there are Tuskegee Airmen who followed those rules, and they were successful. They were successful by following those rules and examples. And I try to follow them too, and I've been successful. I got promoted, now this is unheard of, I got promoted every year I was in, until I got to the top. Every year I got promoted because I did my best. That gunnery meet I was telling you about, my airplane was there. Out of the whole squadron of airplanes, they chose 4. One of them was mine. Yeah. So, Are there any questions? I'm open for questions. If I can't answer them, I've got somebody here who can answer them for me. Are there any questions?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. We would love to have the opportunity to have a Q&A, but because of time constraints, we cannot. As a matter of fact, the young man who did the original introduction will come back up and dismiss those who need to go on to their next venue, and then the advisors will be our next engagement. So let me get Mr. Peoples right quick. Excuse me.
Okay. On behalf of the Texas region, I would like to thank you for your fearless efforts to change the way we view each other. So we're going to give you some gifts. Okay, before we adjourn, or before Nathan adjourns, and says his stuff, right? Okay, never mind.
All right. Before I adjourn, I would like all of the veterans to come to the stage and take a picture with the outstanding Tushegge Airmen that we have here. Do not miss your opportunity, please. And again, let's give these gentlemen another round of applause. Thank you for your service, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. All right, scholars. Again, that is a good-looking group. Before I adjourn, please, scholars, go directly to your seminar groups. And I hereby adjourn the 4th General Session. Yes, advisors will stay in this room, stay put, relax. And now, I hereby adjourn the 4th General Session of the 2014 Texas Honors Institute. That's a wrap.